And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Nick Langton, who's the founder and CEO of Alta Global, ticker MMA. And Nick, I want to take big thank you for coming on the show. I'm very excited to hear your story, learn about your company, and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Great to be here today, Adam. I appreciate you having me on.
So Nick, I always like to begin. Can you please tell us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, well, look, I'm sitting here today talking to you, Adam, 51 years of age with grown-up teenage sons and what have you. I actually started in financial markets more broadly at the end of 1996 in Sydney, Australia. I actually had my first job with a New York owned investment bank, a banker's trust. They had a business in Australia, which was actually a really amazing and lucrative funds management and investment banking business. And after studying economics at Sydney University, I went into kind of my first graduate job at Bankers Trust, which was just a wonderful proving ground, a wonderful place to start my career. I often reflect that I was blessed to go into a very high performing workplace with a lot of really intelligent and funny people, which I think was a huge catalyst for ultimately where I got to. And I worked in financial services through to 2001. And then my wife, who also she was a derivatives analyst and trader at what used to be Barclays de Zoetweg, and then became ABN AMRO. So she was also in capital markets, and we got married and then had 12 months traveling around the world, which was just the best experience ever. And then came back and got sort of a bit more serious about life in 2002. Came back. My wife went back to work in asset management. Actually became a portfolio manager with a UK based fund, and I started working again back in Sydney, Australia, and kind of built my career from there through to probably my last two roles. I ran private wealth at Perpetual, which is a really large a listed company here in Australia, wealth advisory, asset management. Wonderful, trusted old company with a very deep, long heritage, and that's where I spent my time. Really, I suppose what I loved was taking care of, or the business I led, taking care of Australian families' wealth and acting as a fiduciary and looking after them. And then after Perpetual, I spent some time at another large wealth advisory and stockbroking business here in Australia. And but during that period, which is kind of an odd pivot back to where I am now, running a listed company in the mixed martial arts and combat sports space, I actually had in 2013, Perpetual sent me to Harvard Business School to do the advanced management program. So I had a couple of months living on campus, sort of studying 6 days a week with just an amazing cohort of people. I was 39 at the time. My family came across and lived in Back Bay in Boston while my wife homeschooled the kids because they were all pretty young then. And we just saw it as a huge life opportunity to do something really cool and live in a great city and what have you. And I'd say one of the biggest moments that I'd say, Adam, definitely altered the trajectory of my life. My wife and my three boys were on the finish line the day of the Boston Marathon bombing.
Oh my
And
goodness. Wow.
yeah, and
Whoa.
long story short, they'd sent me a photo. My wife had sent me a beautiful photo I've still got of my three boys, like literally right at the finish line on Boylston Street. Just they were standing just outside the Prudential Centre. And then I went into class, and then a colleague of mine in my class who worked for a US intelligence agency had actually mentioned at the end of class, there's been a suspected terrorist attack and bombing at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And then,
Oh.
of course, I immediately just went like cold and rang my wife. But of course, they shut down the mobile reception immediately. And Thankfully, I've got through to my wife after 30 minutes. They'd actually left about 20 minutes before
Oh, wow.
um,
Big
the
blessing.
explosions. But I had, in that 30 minutes, not knowing and knowing that that's where they were, I kind of just the most surreal out of body experience. And I think that kind of changed the way I looked at how precious life is and the impermanence of everything. And it probably recalibrated how I thought about taking risks and building a meaningful life. I really trace my time there because that happened early in the doing the advanced management program. So I really had some time to contemplate what I wanted to do. And I think in that moment, I probably decided that long term corporate was not where I was going to stay. Um, my boys ironically started their jiu-jitsu journey in Boston. Professor Alex Costa trained them at Gracie Barra in Back Bay, Boston. Incredible school. Just my boys loved it. They were, super young at the time, and and that kind of got me to. I'd done a lot of martial arts as a kid, particularly judo, and then we came back home to Australia after our trip, and I was like, I want to get back in and do that again. And that was kind of the seed to reignite my passion and interest in the sector, and really started to think about the opportunities and the growth. So that was kind of I suppose the germination of where I've gotten to today.
Wow, I love that. What an incredible story. So let's
Mm,
talk about your company. Please tell us about your
yeah.
company and your competitive advantages.
Yeah. So Alta, we listed back on the NYSE American back at the very end of March of this year. I think what's fascinating, combat sports is incredibly cool. To number one, we're just seeing unparalleled fan base growth. The latest data I've seen, the UFC now have like 700 million fans. That's a business that was acquired in 2001 for $2 million,
Wow.
sold in 2016 to Endeavor, KKR, and Silver Lake for like 4.5 billion or thereabouts, and now is got a market cap in the vicinity of $13 billion. So it's just an incredible business and just a juggernaut. But then you've had massive investment in competing leagues. I read this morning, one championship, which is the UFC of Asia. They've just raised 50 million from Qatar. Another group, the PFL, recently raised 100 million from Saudi. There's huge amount of investment going into the space, but ironically, there's been just no investment into what we believe is going to be, ultimately one of the most valuable components, which is this whole concept of, as a fan base grows that rapidly, the opportunity to convert fan base into participation over time is an enormous opportunity. And really, the core of Alta's mission is to connect 700 million fans of MMA with online and particularly in gym training experiences with a huge global inventory of gyms. And Adam, what is often misunderstood, the size of the addressable market for combat sports is incredible. Like you've got by the end, again, IBIS data is saying by the end of 2025, you're going to have close to 70,000 martial arts and combat sports gyms in the United States alone. They're also reporting that current annual spend training martial arts in the United States is in excess of $18 billion a year. But ironically, this spend is just dispersed across small businesses. There is literally zero concentration. So it's a very large sector, but it's also highly cottage. It's effectively all owner operators. And as a consequence, there's huge curiosity in like how to get started training. Like people watch a UFC. That doesn't mean they want to necessarily compete in MMA, although we've got amazing programs to give people their first, amateur fight, their first bucket list fight if they want. But in terms of the ability to go and train as a hobbyist and just get fit, meet a great community of people to train with, learn some really important skills, feel more confident and safer personally. There's a huge amount of curiosity to do that. But when you've got a very fragmented brand landscape of, 70,000 odd small business owners all clamoring online to capture the attention, in many instances, it's not like the algorithms necessarily know, well, where do we disperse the, the all these queries too. And so from our perspective, what we're building at Alta is really that hub, to engage fans of martial arts and combat sports, and to put them into gyms and train. And so from an enterprise value, we're onboarding the customer. We're tokenizing their credit cards, so we're building the subscription, and then we're passing that customer to the gym so they can train, they can be geolocated, they can look up what's a good gym near me, what are the coaches like, what disciplines could I do. So effectively, at our very core, it's that overall organization, of the sector, if you like. And I think, some good proxies that current investors of ours have used is like, when you think about what, Yelp and Open Table and Seven Rooms did for restaurants, when you think about, how the travel sector is just, so dominated by these incredible platforms that where you can literally do anything, book anything, and that platform connects you with all the available inventory of hotels, flights, car hire, you name it. And so that's a really good proxy for what we're doing, for martial arts and combat sports.
I love it. So, Nick, if I understand you correctly, it's almost kind of like a roll up where, 50 years ago, there were pharmacies on every corner. There were a lot of mom and pop pharmacies. And then over the last 50 years, they've consolidated. And now there's maybe three or four major pharmacies in the US. So is that similar to what you're doing, where there's hundreds and hundreds of small businesses that do MMA, but there's no way to know if they're good, not good, all that kind of stuff. But what you want to do is just roll them up and have some credibility there and build a brand around that?
Yeah, not so much a not so much a roll up. We're literally wanting to, enable for them to showcase, their business, their timetable, their classes, their coaches, and literally match. Again, that's why I think that the proxy around, Yelp, for example. We particularly in the United States, where obviously I travel very frequently, where the community has invested so much time in providing ratings, and like I find Yelp really helpful. I also then find, Seven Rooms and Open Table, finding a vacancy again, rather than just Googling a restaurant in an area and being geolocated. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to a more curated solution here. And what does it do? It actually accelerates my spending.
Right.
It brings me to a transaction and a decision point more quickly. And so we look at this vast sector. We look at these wonderful small business owners. Our history has been, putting customers into gyms and generating millions and millions of dollars for small business owners. That's something we're really proud of. But we want them to be able to flourish and I suppose sell their wares in a far more direct and curated way through our platform. And then recently we've just signed a fantastic deal with UFC Gym Group. So UFC Gym Group, obviously is a business that's, a part owned by the UFC, but also, a couple of fantastic owners in the CEO, Adam Sedlak and Mark Mastrov, the original founder. And they've got, like, I think about 100 locations in North America. So again, it gives you a sense of how cottage the sector is. If they're a really dominant player with 100 locations, but we're saying by the end of next year there'll be close to 70,000. It just shows you there is like zero market concentration. But they're an amazing brand with an amazing offer. So we're now offering our programs and our platform and technology to them as well.
Wonderful. So you're able to be more of a marketing machine for them, help customers figure out what the best location is for their needs, opposed to actually
Correct.
acquiring the small businesses and rolling them up.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. No, we are literally, the technology platform that connects the customer, with the experience close by them. We do have, subscriptions for online training, which I think can be really helpful, when people want to, get started or learn a bit more. They might feel like, I'm excited, but I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know a lot. We ultimately are extremely passionate, Adam, about getting people into a physical gym, right? Train with people. Training martial arts is wonderful for the community of friends. that you meet. The great paradox is the kind of the level of safety and customer care inside martial arts and combat sports gyms is greater than I've experienced in any other training environment. Perhaps because they're also eager to show everybody you can go there and you're not going to get beaten up. Like it's a great supportive environment, and so to that extent, we want all these small businesses to put their best foot forward, but we also recognise that sometimes customers want to put their toe in the water and learn a bit online before we can match them up with an opportunity to train in a local gym. So our mission is to get 700 million fans of the UFC and mixed martial arts into local martial arts academies, get them on the mats, get them training, get them in shape, and learn some real life skills. And I think that's a kind of a final point I'd make why we advocate so hard for training in martial arts and combat sports. You're going to get really fit doing it, without question. But if you're going to get really fit, wouldn't it be valuable if you're also learning a really practical skill that makes you feel more confident and makes you feel more personally safe?
Yeah, no,
And we find that the lifetime value of customer is a lot more sticky when you're learning an actual sport with a lifelong learning syllabus.
yeah, it makes perfect sense. Where you're not done in 3 days and then that's it, it's over. You're going for
Yeah,
yeah, it goes deep and deep and deep. All right,
yeah.
beautiful. Nick, next question for you is how do you handle risk and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management?
I mean, how do you handle risk? I suppose I think of it through a couple of vectors. Number one is forward looking. As a CEO and a business, you have to look into your operations, understand what could go wrong, in terms of whether it's with customers, whether it's cyber, whether it's whatever myriad of risks that every business who's operating kind of faces into. So you have to have that forward lens on risk. And I think all good businesses use a pretty detailed matrix to assess and rank risk according to likelihood and severity. If an event came off, that's kind of a fairly usual methodology. I think personally, we all learn a lot from our mistakes. And so I think it's enormously valuable to also have that kind of review mirror on risk where you think about some things that have gone wrong or how you would better handle it. And I think, Adam, that if you can harmonize those experiences of mistakes made with, a really thoughtful forward view on risk, and you put the time into that process, and then you embed as many automated processes as you can to protect against it, as opposed to relying on individuals to do certain things every single day. So I mean, that's broadly how I think about doing it, and just knowing it's a game where you're trying to get better all the time at risk management.
Love it. And then what about some timeless lessons you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience along the way in life and business, anywhere you want to go?
Look, I reflect on this a lot because leaving a really good corporate career to go and kick off a startup in my, approaching my mid 40s with three sons in private school education, and going for years without taking a dollar out of the business, and putting money into the business, a lot of money into the business. I think what fascinates me, my risk profile as a human being has profoundly changed. If you told me 15 years ago I was capable of taking the risk I've now taken as a founder and entrepreneur, I would have said zero chance I could do that. So I think people should be very sort of conscious that they're capable of a lot more, and that I don't want to say glibly follow your dreams, but I do think that I know all around the world, there's people listening to this who have enormous capabilities and maybe a very safe and successful career, but I would encourage them to think about how they dabble and how they I'm loath to say side hustle. That's just such an overused term, but I think you can invest in some things quite actively invest in some ideas and sectors that you love. And I think there's opportunities to do more. And, that led me on a journey to, I didn't know we were going to get to where we got to. I knew the opportunity existed, Adam. I could see the macros of the sector. I knew what we were building was needed. And we got some great early traction that proved we could take people who'd never trained in combat sports, and, they'd be very happy to get involved and try it out. So I really warmly encourage people. They've got a lot more potential than they think. And I think I'm proud of the fact that I'm whatever potential I may have, I'm certainly squeezing every bit out of it in this venture. And the other point I would say on that, like I remember my parents, your parents tell you things when you're a teenager, and yeah, you kind of, I can see my boys do the same to me now. Yeah, Dad,
I
but
get that. Yeah.
but we do, you hear those things that success is, 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. It's such a great truism. It really is. If I think 90% of success in life is continuing to show up, on the good days and the bad days. And there's more bad days than good in founding a business. It's harder than you could ever believe, but it just feels so worth it. And so, I think when anybody in business is going through a tough time in their career, in a business they run, I empathize enormously, but I warmly encourage them that, one foot in front of the other. As what my wife reminds me, there's a great book we love, and there's a page in the book where a boy says, "I can't see my way through." And his horse said to him, "Can you see your next step?" And he says, "Yes." And the horse says, "Well, just take that."
Yeah.
I think that's a really apt metaphor for just keep going.
I love that. That is so, so powerful. It's almost like when you drive at night with the headlights, you can't see your destination, but you don't have to. You can just see a few feet in front of you, and that's it. You're good. Keep going,
That's
and then
great.
I love that. Okay, beautiful. So next question for you, Nick, is what about timeless mistakes? What are some mistakes you see people make or you've made that you want to share with the audience, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah. Um, I mean, God, mistakes. I think a mistake we've all made from time, or maybe not everyone, but I certainly think is a somewhat universal mistake is kind of thinking you've cracked it or you've got it, and just allowing just the tiniest bit of hubris to leak in, right? I've made that mistake, absolutely. Um, the counterbalance to that, Adam, is I think there is a mistake people make where they worry about the worst thing and they catastrophize. So they use a coping mechanism to say, okay, I'm going to work backwards from the worst possible outcome, and if I can feel okay about that, then so that I think that's a really unproductive and unhelpful use of time. And I've had to work really hard as somebody who I'd say I was, as a young man, as a kid, I worried a lot, and I think probably the proudest thing I've done in my own personal development is actually not become a warrior anymore. I could never could do what I'm doing now if I allowed that to. So I think there's a couple of counterbalances. Number one, be very, very wary of any degree of hubris. That's when you get bitten. And number two, nothing is ever as bad as it feels. And there is nothing like 8 or 9 hours of sleep that is an incredible remedy to the worries and the stresses. And you wake up, splash your face with cold water, and get ready and start your day.
I love it. Somebody told me one time worrying is like praying for what you don't want.
Yeah,
That was
that's
so powerful.
so
Yeah,
apt.
yeah.
That's so apt.
I love it. Okay, beautiful. Next question for you, Nick. Leadership. You've been in lots of different places in your career. What makes a great leader, and what are some lessons you've learned about leadership that you'd like to share with the audience?
Mm. Um, I think what I often think about leadership. I remember, like the best leaders are. You can have a title, and that can mean you run a team and what have you. But at the end of the day, leadership is something that is anointed to you by your peers. right? Regardless of title, unless you're in a complete command and control environment like the military, where there is just okay, there is no room for anything else. There is zero ambiguity. But I think anywhere else in life, leadership has to be inspired by a number of factors. Number one, your personal integrity and how you operate. Um, when people around you see that you're prepared to do the crappy work, or you're not going to ask them to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. I think just this kind of authenticity and trust that's built by that. I think another really powerful part of leadership as well is actually the empowerment of the talent around you. I would say, I'm far from saying I'm a great leader, but I think one thing I do really well. Once I know and trust somebody, I love to empower them to demonstrate the full range of their capabilities. I think that's where the magic really happens, where a person feels these guys have got this guy's got my back,
Yeah.
and they're backing me to do this, and they're going to give me the tools and resources, and they're also going to make sure that they can that they're available if I'm struggling or I want to get help on solving a problem or what have you. So I think if you really want to extract that, additional effort where people just volunteer more than what their job description is or the hours they're going to work because they're just so on board with the mission. I personally believe that comes from when people feel incredibly empowered and trusted. And the best leaders I've ever had have really given me that huge amount of autonomy and support. Now, they've pushed me hard and they've held me accountable to targets and results. Um, and then I've also dealt with other leaders in business that kind of rule with an iron fist and cajole people through fear and other things like that. And they're just such toxic traits. They lead to crappy work cultures, and high performers don't stay around there. So, yeah, I personally believe great leadership is your ability to actually empower and extract discretionary effort from your staff and your talent.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I couldn't agree with you more. How about adversity? How do you handle adversity? I know leadership and adversity, you have to go through adversity, obstacles. How do you handle adversity? And what are some obstacles you had to overcome along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like adversity, resilience, I think, going back to what I said earlier, like nothing's as good as it seems and nothing's as bad as it seems. And I think, as I said before, like it's amazing how you look at a problem through a very different lens after 8 or 9 hours sleep. I certainly know for me that is something. If I get stuck in a cycle of overly worrying, can't switch off, you know, tempted to start catastrophizing, I know that actually what I really need is a proper rest and to wake up with fresh eyes. I think as well, another thing that's given me, I'm fortunate to have an amazing board. My board is comprised of long-term investors in my company. Um, they've got a lot of skills in capital markets, so I feel very reassured and safe by what they give me. But the older problem shared is a problem halved. Being a CEO, being a founder and a CEO of a listed company, there is a lot of stress associated with that. And so if you're going to do your best work, you're going to be resilient. You do also need people around you. You need great people who you can trust, you can lean on. And they'll often, if you can't see the forest for the trees, they'll give you a more objective perspective that'll help you go, yeah, okay, I see that again now. And then it's just time in the seat, right? Like, as you go through and survive so many tough times, particularly building a business, which we all know, like you know, I think it's something like 94% of startups don't make it to year 7, right? So I'm now at year 8. So, and I'm not saying we've made it, but we've certainly made it a lot further than most. And just sometimes it's like reps, Adam, like just surviving enough tough stuff and getting through it. It's like muscle memory. Okay, this too shall pass. And so, I think it's really valuable to give yourself that perspective, and experience gives you that confidence that you'll solve for it and you'll move on to the next challenge.
Absolutely love it. That really, really, really powerful right there. So let's talk about final question for you. Best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Oh, I mean, I think the best piece of advice I could give the audience would be probably the same advice I'd give my 30-year old self. Um, and that is that, you know, patience is really important. I really don't think nearly enough people play the long game. If I'm proud of something I've done with my career, but especially this business, is that I've absolutely believed in the North Star of what we're building. And I don't believe in that glibly, right? I've done the research. I know the market intimately. I studied it very heavily before I decided to found the company. I'm incredibly excited by the opportunity. So I've got a really strong foundation for belief and that North Star. But then it really is a case, Adam, of playing the long game. And I just see so many people, they get tired, they get frustrated, and they fall into this terrible trap of, I have worked so hard, therefore I deserve.
Right.
Well, you don't deserve it until it happens. I'm not diminishing your effort, but that is one thing that people do not do enough of. And I mean, thankfully, I think it's something that I was always okay at. I think it's something I've gotten way, way better at. And that is really, and when you're building a company on public markets, you can watch the share price every day. You can worry about, every single thing that happens every week in the business. But at the end of the day, if we're building, true enterprise value, significant enterprise value over a long period of time, you have to play the long game. You have to be patient. You have to be resilient. And that's where the rewards are. So I think about when I talk to my, three sons, my twins are on the verge of university. My youngest has got 2 more years of school left. I think a lot about, if there's one attribute or trait I can anchor in them, is just patience to play the long game and keep turning up.
I love it. Well, Nick, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak today. How do people learn more about Alta and everything you have going on?
Yeah, so by all means, jump onto our socials. So our social handles are at Train Alta, TrainAlta, and also trainalta.com. And by all means, Google us. We've, our most famous investor, Conor McGregor. We did a great, announced a recent deal with Conor, coming on board to become, a really prominent ambassador for us, remunerated through a lot of exciting performance shares that kind of vest all the way up to $20 a share. So by all means, Google Alta and Connor, and follow our socials, and check out our website. And yeah, we're really excited to build this company pretty significantly in the coming years.
I love it. Well, Nick, congratulations on all your success, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. This was absolutely fantastic.
Terrific. Thank you, Adam.